My name is Vahe Sahakyan. I'm a researcher and senior information resources specialist at the University of Michigan-Dearborn Armenian Research Center. Welcome back to the Armenian Studies Cyber Community Chats. The subject of our today's conversation is the United States political discourse on the Armenian genocide. Joining me is Dr. Sona Hakobyan, the head of the Department of Foreign Languages and Literature at Eurasia International University in Yerevan, Armenia. Dr. Hakobyan holds a PhD in philology from Yerevan Birusov State Linguistic University. Her research focuses on linguistic semantics, corpus linguistics, political discourse, political linguistics, and pragmatics. Dr. Hakobyan is currently a visiting scholar with the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia. Dr. Hakobyan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Hi, Vahe. Nice to meet you. Nice that you introduced me. Thank you for introducing and for enabling me to talk to you.
Thank you. It is likewise great meeting you. So one of the major categories that you use in your research is political discourse. I would like to start with a question about how you define political discourse, perhaps in the context of your linguistic approach.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, standing as a crucial element and category of my research, political discourse is most commonly used to refer to political language. Supposedly, politics and political discourse are subject of many interdisciplinary researches as well as a subject to teaching, because we have some curricula, we developed some syllabi for political discourse analysis, political discourse and discourse studies. Political discourse can be analyzed and defined from various viewpoints, from political point of view, from the psychological point of view, from individual hermeneutic point of view. So I try to define it from linguistic perspective, which is perceived as a mode of analysis on textual sign of a political discourse, considering it as a verbal macro sign in its social, cultural, and political context. I consider linguistic studies of paramount importance because political thoughts and actions are inseparable from political speech. Words, actions, and events work together. Yeah? Words interpret events, actions, as well as constitute political facts, and actions in various ways help to gain their political efficacy. Yeah? In fact, in this context, actions are born, prepared, realized, and controlled by the help of language. So that's why to define and to study political discourse from linguistic point of view is very important.
That's interesting. So you're applying this approach in particular to study the US political speeches about the Armenian genocide. So I'm wondering, what is the need for studying the speeches of American presidents and officials about the Armenian genocide?
Okay, admittedly, the United States of America as the so-called superpower of the world, yeah, and its views can expeditiously influence, let's say, the peace and geopolitical pace all over the world. The genocide perception and recognition will serve first of all as a moral satisfaction and will assure justice. It will be a signal of a moral respect for victims, and most importantly, it will aid, yes, to suffering people and prevent future genocide. And preventing future genocides will be well prevented through education, through scholarships, through research. So that's why such kind of researches are of utmost importance in the recognition and prevention processes. And it first of all will boost humanitarianism in the context of political and economical viewpoints.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, of course, genocide prevention is very important, and this kind of speeches may have much relevance for preventing future events like that. So I was curious to know if you have also studied the perhaps other implications of various speeches given by the officials in the United States on international politics and policymaking.
Okay, yeah, actually I have intentionally studied nearly all speeches and resolutions on genocide in the USA, starting from Woodrow Wilson and coming to Donald Trump and all the resolutions and of the Senate and something. However, I can posit that there are repeated with insignificant modifications. All of them are, besides Reagan and Woodrow Wilson, all of them nowadays are repeated. The attempt of repeating and recreating discourse assures a political continuity first of all, and loyalty to the previous approach of the events of 1915, and repetition is condemned by modern foreign policy implications regarding the term genocide. Yeah, the expressions that are used in US political discourse are actually a matter of foreign policy. They use 1.5 million Armenians were massacred, were mass studios, were deported, as they are building a kind of foreign policy, in as much as when the word genocide has a definite legal value in international law. So that's why they avoid using legal and international law accepted words.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess my next question is about what do you think about what kind of relevance this kind of speeches may or may not have in the everyday life of Armenians, whether in Armenia or in the diaspora?
Well, every year on April 24th, Armenians all over the world, and especially they from diaspora, strenuously hope for genocide recognition. The word genocide, yes, the utterance of the word genocide worldwide, first of all, for our national security, peace, and adoption. Still, the term "U-M-Dearborn" is used in present-day US-American political discourse, and it's quite acceptable and intelligible for Armenians all over the world, because in our native language, we understand the meaning of the "Yerer." In our dictionaries, it's implied that it is outlined as a genocide, but for the international audience, it's somewhat a meaningful linguistic sign, meaningless, yes, it has no meaning. They read these some words written in English letters, but has no meaning. So this is the case that they express it for only maybe for Armenians, and the Armenians who say that they said "U-M-Dearborn," so they recognize the word, but for international community it's something meaningless.
Oh, well, that's interesting, actually. Well, since you've used so much theoretical, approach studies to analyze the U.S. speeches, I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit about the approach that you call event semantics analysis. That seems to be the major approach that you've been using in your work. Can you please describe this approach and also talk about its advantages or maybe limitations when analyzing political discourses?
Yes, sure. I want to start that event semantics analysis has been a subject of my PhD dissertation when I was defending in 2015. I had done my PhD dissertation within the framework of this model, within this framework of this approach, which enables to define and reveal the hidden arguments of the given text and mostly about the discussing event. I intentionally have chosen the events of 1915 from the United States perspective. Why? Because you see, American political discourse is somewhat maneuvering and evasive discourse, as described by Professor Sona. So in this discourse, it will be much more interesting to implement the theory in order to understand how they maneuver, how they evade from the word, in what linguistic means, in what semantic categories. So this is a really interesting theory within the scope of linguistic studies, as events are applied in a wide variety of linguistic problems. There's so many linguistic problems, including the semantics of adverbial adjuncts, perception reports, thematic relations, nominalization, and so on. So within this approach, I can outline that the US political discourse is interpreted as a recognition of genocide, because they use adverbial modifiers, they use place, adverbs of place. They say in the final years of the Ottoman Empire, they mention the years, so they are familiar with the history, and they intentionally accept the existence of genocide, just evade or avoid from the legal word. This event semantics enables to find out the hidden meanings of the text. Currently, I'm studying event structure metaphor. It's a new trend in conceptual metaphors theory, where, for example, event structures like state, changes, positions, actions, causes can be interpreted cognitively in the terms of space, motion, and force. And in that context, the speeches of US presidents are outlined as changes, causes that are forces, changes that are movements. So this is really interesting from the linguistic standpoint, which then will boost the prevention, will boost the general understanding of the events and of the talks.
Well, speaking about changes, Recently, as you know, both the US House of Representatives and the US Senate passed resolutions about the Armenian genocide. I'm sure you're familiar with, with President Trump's recent statement on the Armenian genocide as well. Have you observed any significant change in the political discourse that followed during and after the congressional resolutions? I'd also be curious to learn what you think about the change of language or the lack of any change, especially in the context of President Trump's statement on the Armenian genocide.
Sure. In that scope, I managed to publish also a scientific article entitled "The Critical Discourse Analysis of Donald Trump's Statement on Armenian Genocide." I would say that there is no significant change in a speech, however. And after the Senate's resolution, I've only noticed that in the Senate it is stated that it is the policy of the United States to encourage education and public understanding of the facts of the Armenian genocide, including the role of the United States in humanitarian relief efforts and relevance of the Armenian genocide to modern democracies against humanity. And only this year, Donald Trump, in his statement, added a kind of sentence that he hadn't in his previous speeches. And he says, "In this day of remembrance, we pay respect to those who suffered and lost their lives, while also renewing our commitment to fostering a more humane and peaceful world." We also use the humanitarianism issues. Yes, we are proud of the founders of the American Committee for Armenian and Syrian Relief, a groundbreaking effort established in 1915 that provided crucial humanitarian support to Armenian refugees. So that is to say, in general, it hasn't been changed so much, only taking the fact of the Senate that it is a humanitarian act, it should be the policy of the United States that it is to be a humanitarian. He used some words concerning humane and humanitarian movements.
Okay, this is actually all the time we have, and I wish we had more time to continue our interesting conversation. Thank you, Dr. Hakobyan, for joining me today. Thank you all for watching us in this series of community chats.
Thank you very much for the interview, for enabling me to take part in this meeting. It's really interesting to discuss my research with you. Thank you for the Armenian Center. Thank you for the Weiser Center. So it's very nice to meet and to see you, to see all of you and discuss my research with you. Thank you.
Thank you.